This video is about classification of organisms. We'll look at taxonomy, hierarchy and phylogenetic trees. First thing you need to know is the definition of a species. So they're organisms of the same group that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. That's a really important definition to know, and you can use it in application questions. So things, what's the evidence that they are not the same species is if they cannot interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So examples of things that are different species, so for example a donkey and a horse will produce a mule, so they can interbreed and produce offspring, that offspring is infertile, so they're different species. The next thing is binomial nomenclature. It's important, especially for A-level and afterwards, to get used to writing species, so the genus name and then the species name. So genus comes first, so pan, capital P, it's always capitalised, and the species name is second, in this case troglodytes, and it's all lowercase, there's no capital there. If they were written on a computer, they'd be in italics, and if you were to write it by hand, you'd underline it. Now this is useful to know because you can work out the level of classification that you've got. If you've got two words like this and they're in italics, uppercase and then lowercase, you know you've got a genus name followed by a species name. We'll come on to that a bit more in a minute. Other examples could be Homo sapiens for humans, or gorilla for gorillas, or Panthera leo for a lion, etc. Another really important definition is a hierarchy, and this picture shows well what a hierarchy is. So hierarchy is smaller groups within larger groups and no overlap between groups. So a species is the smallest group, there's only one different type of thing in a species, but a domain has got millions of different species within that one broad group. So domain's got the most different species in it, different groups within it, then kingdom, then phylum, then class, then order, then family, then genus, then species. Adults use a mnemonic to remember this. On the old spec you didn't need the D at the top, in which case you could have king, prawn, curry or fresh green salad for the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. But now you need to know domain is at the top above kingdom. So this doesn't work that well. You could think of your own, but it works for me and I remember it quite well that way. Bit of exam technique, if ever you see yourself got a classification question, in a question I'd straight away write down the first letter of each of these, so domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and having that at the side or next to the diagrams or pictures or images that you get will help you answer questions. So here again is the definition of a hierarchy. It's really important. It's often a 2-mark question. Larger groups containing smaller groups, or you could say smaller groups within larger groups, and no overlap between groups. And that can be illustrated by both of these images. So here we can say on the outside circle representing a kingdom, the animals. This next circle is representing the phylum. The circles within that are then representing the next group down, which is class. So you've got different classes within the vertebrates, which is the phylum. So that's showing circles, smaller circles within larger circles, and each of these smaller circles then don't overlap. Another example showing hierarchy is this taxonomic diagram here. So we've got kingdom animals at the top, then smaller groups within that, phylum, so we've got chordates, so things with a backbone, and we've got annelids, which are worms, and split that up into smaller groups. Class, so one smaller group within things with a backbone and mammals. Order, one smaller group within mammals is primates. Family, one smaller group within primates is hominidae, so hominids. And then one genus within that would be Homo, and then there's one species within that, which would be sapiens. There did used to be other species within the Homo genus, so for example Homo erectus or Homo neanderthalis for Neanderthals, etc. There's just one species of Homo alive on the planet now. And you can see here how worms and humans are not in the same group, they're not overlapping. So here's an example of a question. At first they look really confusing, but after you practice it they become quite straightforward. So straight away I'd write the first letters of the hierarchy. So mine reciting the mnemonic. So do you prefer king, prawn, curry, or fresh green salad? So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Using that, I can straight away fill in this diagram. And it's clear to see that in this example there is no domain because there's no space above kingdom in the table. And then following it through, we're then using what we wrote down at the side to fill in the gaps. So after kingdom's phylum, then class, then order, the family, then genus, and species. We've then got this other way that you can represent. You've got this way you can represent a hierarchy. So the circles within circles, so smaller groups within larger groups. So looking at the table, we've got a kingdom on the outside for animals. We've then got the phylum within that. We've then got the class within that, which is mammals. We've then got the carnivora, which is representing the order within that. We've then got the Felidae, which is the family within that. And then we've got two things to fill in. We need to put the tigers in the right group and the clouded leopards in the right group. So, the genus, up until now, they've all been in the same groups, both animals, both chordates, both mammals, both carnivora, both Felidae. So they've all been in the same circles, but now we've got one in the Panthera, so we've drawn a separate circle for Panthera, and the clouded leopards in the Neophilus genus, so we've drawn a separate genus circle for the clouded leopard. So they no overlap between groups. And then within the Panthera genus, you've got the tigris, so you can see here. Apologies for my writing; it's hard to do it with this pen on the iPad. And then we've got within the Neophilus genus, we've got the nebulosa species, which is there. It's important you know how to both draw and analyse diagrams like this. So that was a hierarchy. Now we're going to look at phylogenetic trees, phylogenetic classifications. And phylogeny allows you to look at the evolutionary history, allows you to look at which is more closely related species. And it allows you to look at points in time when things diverge from each other, or when there were common ancestors on the planet. It's not always drawn on the diagrams, but you can think of it as almost being like a timeline. So over here, so many million years ago, so it could be say 500 million years ago or something right down here. And up here you've got the present day. So in here we've got the orange, the ones that are species that are alive on the planet today, and in red the ones that are now extinct. So using this, let's say this was 500 million years ago down here. On the planet existed the common ancestor for all things with backbones that later evolved into sharks, into birds, into humans, and into whales. And then you can use this to work out which are more closely related to each other. So for example, is a crocodile or a tuna more closely related to a human? So if you follow the human and you follow the crocodile, that here is the point in time where those species would have had a common ancestor on the planet. And then if you look at tuna and humans, so follow humans back, follow tuna back, that there is the point in time where they had a common ancestor on the planet. So that point of divergence is further back in time, more million years ago than this one here. So you'd say that the crocodile and the human are more closely related because their common ancestor was alive on the planet closer to the present day. Sometimes there's a question, what's the difference between a phylogenetic tree, a phylogenetic diagram like this, and a hierarchy, like in the diagrams you saw in the previous slides. So the phylogenetic diagram is based on evolutionary history, and it shows the points of divergence, or when common ancestors were around on the planet. Whereas the taxonomy, or the hierarchy, is purely based on shared characteristics seen today. So how can you decide which things are more closely related to each other? So for a long time the relationships were based on homologous characteristics. So for example here we've got the arm and the hand joints. So things that are more closely related had more similar features. So homologous characteristics mean that they carry out the same function or similar function. You can also use courtship behaviour So similarities in courtship behaviour to determine how closely related species are. So the more similar the order of events is in their courtship behaviour, the more closely related the organisms are. In a question, you would have to list either the things that are not similar, so the differences in the courtship. So for example, a Drosophila, different species, one might scissor their wings and another might not. That might indicate they're different species because they've got different courtship behaviour. But the more similar the species are, the more similar the sequence of events are in courtship behaviour. But more recently we used genetics, so similarities in base sequence in DNA or amino acid sequence in proteins, to judge which things are more closely related to each other. So this was based on homologous characteristics, an old classification system for primates, and it showed that humans were set apart from the other apes. But with the new classification system using sequences in DNA and amino acid sequences in proteins, it shows that humans are more closely related to the bonobo and chimpanzee, and the bonobo and chimpanzee are less closely related to the gorilla and orangutan compared to the previous model. Here are some other questions you could get, and sometimes a hierarchy diagram might look like a phylogenetic tree. So first question is genera. What do we mean by genera? So that's the plural genus. So it's not genuses, it's genera. So to work this one out, first if you pause the video and you have a go first, and then press play again after to hear the answer. Well, you're looking for what is the genus name. So remember, you've got the genus name and then the species name. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different species. It's 9 different species names. But we've got 1, 2 lots of Moronga, we've got 1, 2, 3 lots of Monarchus, we've got 1 lot of this one here, another lot of that one there, another one of those, and one of those. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different genuses, or genera. Here it says this is a taxonomic group. Which taxonomic group is this an example? So if you're just looking at this, and if it didn't tell you what anything else meant, you can work this out. If you remember the binomial name, nomenclature, you start off with the genus name and the species. So you know that each of these must be a species. So then the next group along, so we've got species and genus. So all of these, if we've got species names, we've got genus names so far, the next level up must be family. So this group here, the Physidae, must belong to the family.